I just want to warn people right off the top. Cam Little is not in these rankings today, and that should show you more than anything how important matchup is for kickers in fantasy football. But nonetheless, we're going through week 3's top 12 fantasy kickers, and I'm one of the only fantasy YouTubers who does weekly kicker rankings. So please go down there and drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Now, getting into our first tier of guys right here, I've got Brandon Aubrey at his rightful place at number 1. Last week, I had him at number 1, and he was fantastic. And listen, guys, I don't think people really realize what we're watching with Brandon Aubrey. We're watching the next great kicker of our generation really come into his own. And not that he hasn't come into his own in previous years, but this guy is so consistent with hitting long field goals. And that's a really hard thing to do. To kick 60-plus yard field goals, that used to be a thing of once every 10 games or once every 12 games. This guy does it on basically a near weekly basis. And it really doesn't matter what the matchup is because Dallas's offense has already proven good enough to get down there against good defenses, against bad defenses. They'll get you in range. And Brandon Aubrey is arguably their best weapon because this guy is automatic when he is on the field. So even against the Bears this week, who I actually think is a little bit of an easier matchup than some may think, I think Brandon Aubrey is in his rightful place at number 1 this week. Spencer Schrader at number 2. Listen, this guy has done phenomenal this season. This guy is averaging 17 fantasy points per game. I'm not sure people understand the value of that. With your kicker averaging 17 fantasy points per game, I mean, this guy is winning people weeks right now in addition to their other options. He had 16 points in week 1 and 18 points in week 2. This guy has been flat out phenomenal. Now, this is a matchup that I have said multiple times this week I think is going to be interesting because I think Tennessee's defense is legit. And I do think that this could be a field goal heavy matchup. So I'm kind of slow to the party, I think, because Spencer Schrader hasn't been this high yet, but he deserves to be here because they've kicked 9 field goals compared to 5 extra point attempts. So they're already kicking a lot of field goals either way. Bottom line is their offense is moving the ball downfield enough for him to get into range. And for example, the longest kick this guy has had is 48 yards. So we still don't know the leg on this guy quite yet, but I will say this guy is in a position this week to where he's playing a tougher defense, but I still think they'll get down there plenty for him. And then Chris Boswell at number 3 to round out this tier. He goes to New England to take on the Patriots this week, and Chris Boswell is also automatic as well. This guy doesn't miss. Like Chris Boswell, as a Steelers fan, I think of him as our most valuable offensive player because the guy is automatic. 14 points in the first week and 12 points last week. Now, he's being overshadowed by guys like Spencer Schrader and guys like Brandon Aubrey so far, but the reality is that Chris Boswell is also in a matchup that I think they'll be able to move the ball probably a little bit better than they did against the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks defense is really good. The Patriots defense, I'm not sure it is very good at all. So I do think that there will be a little bit of a bounce back week offensively, and Boswell gets more opportunities this week. Now, dropping down to our next tier right here, I've got Tyler Loop at number 4 and Joey Sly at number 5. Now, with Tyler Loop, this is a matchup versus the Detroit Lions on Monday night that I think just has to be taken into account for fantasy purposes. Like, you want options on really both sides of the ball in this one. But when it comes to the kicker position in specific, I definitely think that Tyler Loop is the guy that you want out of the kickers in this matchup, because I do think that, I've said this multiple times this week, I think the Lions could get played in this game. Like, I think the Lions might not play as good as they did last week. It could look similar to the Green Bay game because I expect Baltimore to potentially beat the Lions pretty bad. So I do think that the Ravens are just in this spot right now where they're going to be able to put up points at will because Lamar Jackson plays so well against NFC teams. So yeah, Tyler Loop is going to be inside of number 4 for me. Joey Sly at number 5. Listen, Joey Sly of the Tennessee Titans, this guy has been all over the place, right? Like, this guy is not a rookie. He's far from it. He's been all over the place, and this year he's done better than he's ever done, at least in my recent memory. He's averaging 16 fantasy points per game. He had 15 in week 1 and 17 in week 2. Again, this is the importance of these kicker videos because this guy was not on anybody's team before this. He may still be on your waivers today. This is a guy that you want in fantasy right now because, again, Tennessee's offense has done just good enough to get him in range plenty of times. He's kicked a 57-yard long field goal. He's got plenty of leg. I think that Joey Sly versus the Indianapolis Colts this week, it's the first real break in schedule to where I can actually really predict that he will actually be a really good fantasy kicker this week. And again, this is the importance of the waiver wire tool that we have automated for you, because as soon as priority waiver wire ads are processed on Wednesday morning, Thursday morning, Friday morning, what our process does is it automates your waiver wire and free agent pickups, so you don't have to fight with anybody to wake up at 3 in the morning to go grab somebody. And this relates directly to kickers. So if you do want to automate your waiver wire today, you could go to FS Roundup and join the premium subscription tier, where you can get a 12-day free trial to try it out for yourself, see the value of it, and then you can also get a full breakdown from me of your fantasy team after your trial ends and you're officially a customer. Now, at number 6 to round out this tier is Cam Dicker of the Los Angeles Chargers, and he's playing the Denver Broncos this week at home. So with Cam Dicker, I do think that this could be a matchup where there's a lot of field goals. And I said that last week versus the Las Vegas Raiders, and it turned out that Cam Dicker only kicked 2 field goals in that game, but he obviously made both of them because the guy is really accurate at this point of his career. So Cam Dicker, I do think of as a guy that in this Denver matchup, I think that Denver is going to come in red hot because they lost a really bad loss against the Indianapolis Colts the other day. So I do think that Cam Dicker is in a spot where you just have to trust the matchup, and the kicker himself is really good, and he's on an offense that's going to get him down there in range. It's just a matter of if they execute on their drives instead of kicking a field goal. But this week against Denver, I think they'll kick more field goals.
This is Ted. Look at him. Ted desperately needs to pick up a new running back, or his fantasy team is toast. For the 3rd year in a row. And losing his season again means one thing.
Oh, no. Come on, Ted. Yeah.
Don't be Ted. Use Fantasy Football Roundup to automate your waiver pickups and rest easy this season. Huh. Look at him.
Now dropping down to our next tier, John Parker Romo of the Atlanta Falcons. This guy took Younghoe Koo's spot. It's like official. Like, head coach Raheem Morris basically said like 90% chance Parker Romo is our kicker in week 3 and probably moving forward. He came in and was amazing in one game for the Atlanta Falcons on Sunday night versus the Minnesota Vikings. He had 18 freaking points in fantasy in that week. He kicked 5 field goals and 1 extra point. Now listen, the reason why he's not higher is because realistically, I think that they'll be able to execute on more touchdowns than they did last week because they're playing the Panthers. I mean, that's just not close to the same level of defense that they played last week versus the Vikings. So I don't think they're going to stall out as many times and be forced to kick as many field goals. With that being said, they're going to put up points. So you want a kicker in this matchup, and John Parker Romo is just the guy that you would want because he's going to put up points. Brandon McManus is at number 8 at the Cleveland Browns this week, and obviously they're going to crush the Cleveland Browns. Green Bay is going to slaughter them. And Brandon McManus is on a team that I think will end up being more touchdown friendly than they are field goal friendly. I mean, through the first 2 weeks, it's been even, right? He's kicked 5 field goals and 6 extra point attempts, but they've also played 2 tougher matchups. This week, they're playing the Cleveland Browns. Like their first real break in schedule, they're going to crush them. So I expect on one hand, Green Bay to go down there, score a bunch of touchdowns, but occasionally they'll stall out on a couple drives. So maybe he'll kick something like 4 extra points and maybe 2 field goals in this game, which will amount to a top 8 fantasy week for a kicker. At number 9, I've got Matt Prater of the Buffalo Bills to round out this tier. I was wrong on him last week. I mean, I really didn't think that he was going to be much of anything last week, but it turns out he was honestly just as good, actually better in week 2 than he was in week 1. In week 1, he had 12 fantasy points against the Baltimore Ravens, and in week 2, he had 14 fantasy points against the New York Jets. The bottom line is Buffalo's just an offense that's really good, and Tyler Bass for years, he really hasn't been that great of a fantasy kicker. Matt Prater's been awesome. Like, he has been kicking a lot of field goals for this team. Their field goal to touchdown ratio is not as crazy as you may think. So tonight, I think that they'll crush the Miami Dolphins. Again, that's the reason he's not higher, because I think they won't have trouble moving the ball at all against this defense here. That's why he's lower, but I still think at this point, he's a top 10 kicker this week. Now, dropping down to our last tier, I've got Harrison Butker of the Kansas City Chiefs at the New York Giants this week. Now, Butker has not been special or anything like that this year. He's the kicker number 14 on the year, 11 points in week 1, 7 in week 2. Solid kicker numbers, but not great. He also has missed 2 kicks this year. So his accuracy is a little off right now. It actually was last year. That's the reason I'm not as big on Butker these days in fantasy, because he has had accuracy issues the past 2 seasons. Now, this week against the Giants, I just think that they're going to win this game clearly. And I also think that this offense is just flat out not talented enough, even with Worley back, to be able to score consistent touchdowns. Like, even against the Giants defense, who is worse than I thought, they're going to be able to get down there and I think stall out. And I think Butker will get opportunities, but I'm a little worried about the accuracy right now. So I'm going to put Harrison Butker at 10 to kind of hedge my bet against his accuracy, while at the same time acknowledging that the matchup is great for a kicker. And then Will Lutz at number 11. You know, it's really funny. For the last several weeks, I've been clowned on for not having Will Lutz inside my top 12. Well, the reality is Will Lutz has done nothing to earn top 12 production. Like, this is a weird week where I want to put him inside the top 12. And listen, I liked Will Lutz last year, but this year, he's not done very much. He kicked 4 extra point attempts last week, and he missed his only field goal attempt. Like, he just hasn't been that good. 8 points in week 1, 4 points in week 2. I hope you didn't play him, but based on the comments, it looks like a lot of people did play him. This is a week I think you can. Because, again, I think this matchup is going to be close. I think that the Broncos are going to give them a run for their money. And I also think that based on the way the Chargers' defense is played, they're not going to be able to execute on scoring touchdowns as much as they would against the Panthers, for example. And I also think that Will Lutz in this Denver offense is not exactly like running like a smooth running ship right now. I still think the Denver offense is going through some turbulence a little bit. So therefore, I think they'll get down there enough for Will Lutz to be a top 12 kicker this week. And then Kaimi Fairbairn is at 12 this week to round us out. So in this one, I'll kind of give you a reason why Little is not in here as well. So he's playing the Jacksonville Jaguars this week in Jacksonville, and I expect the Texans to crush them this week. I really do. I know the Texans are 0-2. The Jags have put up a lot of points. I think there's a thing with toughness in the NFL that's not quantifiable. And I think it separates me from other fantasy creators because I identify tough teams and weak teams. The Jags are a weak team. They look really weak to me. They just look like they could put up points. The Texans, on the other hand, are tough. And I think they'll punch them in the mouth. So I think that they'll get enough opportunities against the Jags defense because they're weak. And I also think that Kaimi Fairbairn is not exactly going to have tons of field goal opportunities because I expect this to be a week where they actually score more touchdowns. And on the other hand, again, with Cam Little, I just don't see him being a guy that is going to execute on many red zone trips this week because I think the Jags are going to get crushed. So let me know what you think of the kicker rankings in the comments below. And if you want to see the top 12 defense rankings for this week, click on this video right here.